lot of people who are new to the industry or who want to break into the industry, can you explain them maybe what is a model risk, like in very simple terms?
This is, imagine like I built like a car, and then our job is to figure out like engineering wise, how safe is this car?
Maybe someone who wants to get in the industry, is it a good time?
Unfortunately, no.
What framework do you have for learning hard things? Maybe maths, coding, modeling.
So the first thing is,
So I have one controversial question for you. Let's say one popular course or certification that you feel is overrated. What should replace it?
all certificates.
Maybe let's say someone is watching again from outside the industry and they want to break in the industry. Like what are the top 3 skills that he should have in order to crack those interviews?
Statistics, marketing yourself, and having a story. And then the third skill I'd say is,
Let's say if you have to start today and from scratch and you have just got your laptop and you have given yourself 12 months, I have to break into the field. What steps would you take?
that's a good question.
Welcome back to the another episode of ROI Show. This episode is particularly close to my heart because in this episode we'll see what it really feels like to be inside the head of a real finance nerd. Someone who have cracked the industry and now shaping it. Our today's guest is Dimitri Bianco, a full-stack quant and founder of Fancy Quant. He is not just another name in the industry. He has worked across all the spectrums of risk. And what's more exciting, in today's video, we will discuss how to create a life in finance and beyond. This isn't another how-to session. It is a blueprint for someone who is trying to enter into the world of finance. Dimitri's knowledge is just not about theoretical models or some certifications. It is about the mindset shift and the real skills that you need to crack into the world of finance. So let's directly jump into it. Let us start. So first of all, it's a good day. How does your life look like right now? Maybe work, routine, energy levels. How does it feel?
It's good. It's been a little different. I've stepped away from the industry a little bit. So I tell people I'm floating. It's hard to explain. I left a full-time job. I was the head of quantitative risk and research at a company called Overrated. It's a fintech company. But now I'm focusing more on like personal research, academic consulting, helping universities kind of restructure curriculum, design, student acquisition, and kind of those sorts of things.
Okay, great. Any specific reason why you moved away from industry to your personal things?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say I moved away per se from industry. I'm still working on quantitative research within itself. I think often it's hard when you're in the industry to keep to do the research, right? If you're not on a team that's solely focused only on research, often you're so busy in other areas of your life, it's hard to get that time to do the research. Timing just turned out to be a good time for me. I just wanted to step away from the job I was currently at. Decided not to even look for a sort of, like a connection or somewhere else to go. And I just kind of decided to take off some time and work on the, things I find more interesting.
Okay, that's great. Let's go back in time and like when was the time when you realized quants is meant for me? Like why not some other field? Or you must be good in like academically in case someone is good, they can choose. There are a lot of options available. When you started realizing quants is meant for me, maybe not something else.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I worked in actually manufacturing. So before all this, age of 16, I was doing manual labor. Pouring concrete, cutting rebar, painting and doing that. And I actually worked my way through operation manager. I ran the accounting and finance department. Was a 35-ton lattice crane operator and like did assembly and all that sort of stuff. And I enjoyed it. But I went to college at the same time during this to go get a finance degree and decided I wanted to do something a little bit more financy. I didn't want to end up in the manufacturing side of it. And so I did the finance degree. And got towards the end of it and had this goal in my head. I'm gonna end up working on Wall Street. I want a problem like you never solve. And I think that was like the catch for me, right? That's why I wanted to end up on Wall Street. And it wasn't until like my senior year, I took a class called financial engineering, which was very new, taught by a master's, PhD in finance student. And I realized after essentially 4 years of undergrad, but I didn't want to end up in traditional finance. Like that fairy tale that was sold to me as a finance major of Wall Street was dead, and quantitative finance had been going. And so that was kind of like a transition point of why I realized like that aha moment of I need math and stat skills that I really don't have. And so that was kind of the tradition of that process.
Okay, and which year this is?
Oh man, this was back in 2011. So 2010, 2011.
Okay, almost 15 years back.
Yeah.
Okay, like what if your younger self is watching your current life today? What would surprise him most about Dimitri today?
I think probably the enjoyment of doing like math and stats and reading textbooks. Uh, so as a younger me, even like in high school, I was not a fan of school. And then I started to enjoy it more in my undergrad, but it was more on the business side. And business side is more, I don't know, there's a soft, like touchy feely, conversational, outgoing portion of it. But I'd never imagined myself with like, a textbook going through math and having it open next to me, whether it's work or self study, and then like programming on my computer. I think that would be a really surprising, I guess, kind of difference in my enjoyment of the actual work versus what I kind of expected it to be.
Okay, okay, great. So, like, I want to ask you, like, something that people assume about you from the internet that's totally wrong. Anything that you can maybe come up with?
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume that since I talk a lot about banking and model validation and model development, I've noticed a lot of people automatically assume you fit into some sort of cookie cutter. And often it's like you're working in a risk team, which is like a compliance team, which has nothing to do with modeling. And I think a lot of people assume that right off the start. And I think it takes a while of either you spend enough time watching a lot of videos or you have a personal one-on-one chat with me to realize most of my day is actually programming math and stats. It's actually not doing like, hand wavy business exercises or like typing out like Word documentation. But I think it's kind of surprising to a lot of people that there's actually a lot of modeling and math that goes into the banking side of it.
Yes, it's all maths. I feel it's like 70%, 80% as we are moving from traditional banking to more digital version of it. It's more or less maths. Okay, so maybe can you tell me about your first real break, like your first job, first project that actually changed your trajectory from what you were doing back in maybe 2011, 12 to something related to quants? Like, how did it happen?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So my first job was at a company called Comerica Bank. So it was a big regional bank. I'd never heard of them. I was from the West Coast in the United States. They were located predominantly out of Detroit, Michigan, and then re-headquartered in Dallas, Texas. And I got my first job there. And part of me going to like a financial engineering degree is you take like derivative pricing, and then I transferred to applied economics, and it's more on the modeling side. My first job was doing what they called model implementation. So the kids these days call it quant dev for many different things. And I had this job, and in my mind, I'm like, I'm not a real quant, right? I'm just here working on implementation. And that was my first big break because they were often short-staffed on model development. So I was sitting in two roles of model development, model implementation simultaneously. And it wasn't until like 5 years later, it really dawned on me that financial engineering is actually engineering financial products, which is derivatives, loans, all these other sorts of asset-backed securities, those sorts of things outside of the realm of, what we consider like derivative pricing. But it took me 5 years to realize like that big break and that change was actually doing quant work because it was all modeling, math, stats. But at the time, it seemed like it was just like another job. Like it was like I got my break. Like it seemed like I got a break. But it didn't seem like it was like that aha moment until probably 5 years later, looking back, being like, that was the job I really wanted, but I didn't realize it at the time.
Like Steve Jobs said, you can always connect the dots looking back.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a lot of people who are new to the industry or like want to break into the industry, can you explain them maybe what is a model risk? Like in very simple term, let's say you have to explain it to your family members.
Okay. So I think it's important to understand what model development is first. So model development is somebody that has a business problem and their job is just to fit a math equation to predict some value, some futuristic thing. That's model development. Model risk or model validation is more or less how do you determine mathematically and quantitatively some sort of number to actually describe the risk behind actually building the model. So I think the easiest way to describe this is imagine like I built like a car, right? That's the developer. They built a car. And then our job is to figure out like engineering wise, how safe is this car? So like, is the car going to last a year, 6 years, 12 years? If that car hits a brick wall or it hits a light post or it hits something, like what's going to happen to the car? Is the car going to like explode? Is it going to light on fire? Right. And you're trying to assess, like, I want this car that you've designed and engineered, which is the model, to be safe. And when it does start to fail, I want like the check engine light to come on. And I want the car to like make a noise so that like the driver knows something's wrong with it. And that's really model risk or model validation, is trying to figure out like how do you make sure that it was engineered properly and how do you put a lot of framework around it so that it operates the way we kind of expect it to operate.
Okay, I think that's a really nice analogy. So, maybe let's say someone is watching again from outside the industry and they want to break in the industry because you have been insider. Like, what are the, let's say, top three skills he should have in order to, it should act as a foot in a door. Like, once he is able to get a role, maybe he'll figure it out himself. But maybe top three skills, four skills that he should have in order to crack those interviews.
That's a good question. One, I think, is going to be statistics. So I think not enough candidates, people on the outside, even people on the inside, understand statistics and all like the testing and the theory that goes into it often will either be explicitly tested or implicitly, like I imply from the way you talk about your projects or your modeling, whether you're valid or not. I think that's the first important skill. The second important skill is going to be marketing yourself and having a story. So I think this goes a lot further than people realize, especially in the quant space. We're so into our math and our stats and our modeling, like we just want to do math. Like everything is black and white. Like, if GRE score is this, if my GPA is this, I should get into this grad school. And then people assume like, I went to this grad school, I had these grades, I should get this job. But they don't realize, I think a lot of times finding the first job and even getting promotions is all about your storytelling. And so it's like, you want to see like this exciting journey because it conveys skills that are hard to fake. Like, do you have perseverance? Can you solve problems with minimal direction? Do you work well with difficult people? So not surprising, the industry is full of difficult people, and learning to work with them is a challenging skill in that. So I think that's the second skill. And then the third skill I'd say is self-learning. So the industry is moving very, very fast. Even when I started way back in the day, there was new regulations, new structures, new requirements. Machine learning really took off, and then deep learning took off kind of under the covers, and not a lot of people talk about it, but there's a lot of research going on in deep learning. And now with LLMs on top of that and AI being explicitly stated, everyone's chasing that. There's often no one there that's going to like be like an old wise, like, mentor that's going to come in and say, let me explain to you how LLMs work. It's more like up to you to kind of do that self-learning. So I think that's kind of the third largest skill that you would need.
Yes. Okay. Okay. I often say this to my students, like, because when I'm taking FRM class, I have to go through 2007-9 financial crisis. And I often say them, it's crisis for the world, but every time there is a crisis, it's an opportunity for us. Maybe after 2 years, 3 years, there will be huge changes in the regulations and like you will have more opportunities. Do you think timing was right in your case? There was crisis in 7-9 and then you are young enough to realize, okay, maybe this could be field for me. Was it the case in your case, in your like life as well?
Yeah, so my timing was really good. But I like to put it to an analogy of kind of like surfing. Because a lot of people ask me this for students, should I get a master? Should I hit the timing? Like you pointed out, like there's no way to predict what the future timing is going to be. It's always easier looking backwards. But I got lucky in my timing in the sense of crisis was like 2008. Dodd-Frank, which was the big US regulations, came out in 2010. And then I didn't join until 2014. So there was this period where it was like starting to ramp up with the regulations. Banks were starting to figure out what was happening. And then I was really lucky catching like that wave more towards the peak. And then I got to ride that wave for a while in the sense of CCAR modeling was completely new. Stress testing was a new idea, at least in the framework of Dodd-Frank. And so we got through this whole, rode the wave a lot. But even now in my career, it's fallen. Like I'm on the low part, like it's the nice waters here. And I like to tell students it's like surfing. Like you might not hit that perfect timing of the wave. And even for me, even if I would have started maybe 2 years earlier, it might have been even better. But you're never going to get the timing. But if you're waiting for that wave and you get into the industry and you have the skills and you're chugging along, different parts of the industry will have waves at different points, whether it's the regulation side, whether it's the trading side. When the banking side is booming with risk management, the trading side is like crying and doing awful. And then now when the market's booming, the risk side's like, oh, it's not doing so well. So I think part of it is just really getting into the waters and getting the surfboard under you. And then realizing in your career, you'll at least hit a few different waves and just try to take advantage of them when they come.
Yes. So like prepare yourself. It's a 30, 40 years long thing. You will definitely get a lot of opportunities. Like what framework do you have for learning hard things? Maybe maths, coding, modeling, maybe, and like learning hard things and not burning out because you have to manage your current job and then you have to learn as well. And then there are other stuff that keeps on popping. So any framework you follow to learn bit faster or maybe stay updated about what is happening?
Yeah. So the first thing is I try to pick one or two things at most to focus on and then completely ignore everything else.
Okay.
So right now my head is in the sand. I'm not worried about AI, LLMs. I bought some textbooks. I got excited. And then I realized like you can only really do one or two things well. And often if you try to keep up with too many current trends, you're always jumping and you never really get the roots of it and kind of the basic material down. And then my process is I always like to get a textbook. So I have lots of textbooks. I have bookshelves inside my house too. But it's getting a textbook and starting to work through it and then taking advantage of being in the modern era. So you kind of like you, right? I'm reading through the book. I'm like, I kind of get it, but I'm kind of struggling to understand it. And then after I do the reading, then I jump onto the internet and look for articles or YouTube videos and find someone doing something similar. And then it usually having like a second perspective, it helps me get that skill down. And then the final step is trying to practice it. So whether it's a problem in the book or finding like a problem I can code out or like a math equation or finding some problems online, really helps kind of like make sure I understand it. And I think practicing that is what makes you like absorb it. Like you actually understand it. It's not like you just read it and you think you understand it. It's like you actually could play with the problem and see how good you knew it.
Okay. Like because you have been mentoring so many students and like I have also been in the industry, what signal tells you like this person will make it? Like when you connect with someone or when you are mentoring them, a lot of times you get an idea that this person is a bit different. He will definitely make it in the industry. So what do you see like as a mentor?
Yeah, there's two things that define I think success usually on the quant space. One is going to be they're passionate about it they're passionate about it and they've done something about it. And two is they're passionate about it for the right reasons. So there's a lot of students that like they'll come to me and say, Dimitri, what should I be working on? Where should I start? You're not going to make it that well. You're not going to be an all-star. I can already tell you right off the bat. Because like you aren't like diving in like something like where are the textbooks? Where are the research? Where are the YouTube videos? Like how are you not getting involved in this? If it really excites you, you should already be like looking at things. And I should have been like something you just stumbled across. Like I was reading all these articles and then your YouTube channel came up and I stumbled into that. But the passion part is part of it. The other part is like the justification. I see a lot of students go, I really want to end up in quantitative finance. And this goes where the storytelling skill we talked about comes in, which is why? Like why? I'm going to pay you $100,000 to start this job, or I'm going to take you on and try to get you in the industry. Why are you involved? The most common reasons for it is one, it makes a lot of money. I really enjoy like the field, but it's always like this very fuzzy feeling. There's not like oh, I really love doing, statistical modeling and I worked on this project in these classes. Like you need to have that excitement and that storytelling. And I think a lot of students kind of vaguely know what quantitative finance is. But like if I'd ask them, like, can you tell me the difference between electrical engineering, quantitative finance, and investment banking? I don't think they could answer it. Like they haven't done their research on like what are the 10 paths that you could take in that process there. So I think those are kind of the two key attributes is the passion and then having like the right reason for getting into the industry.
Okay. And like what is happening in the quants world right now? Maybe hiring, what kind of projects are in most demand? Any regulation that is increasing the demand, and maybe someone who wants to get in the industry. Is it a good time?
Um, Unfortunately, no. I think it's kind of a dying time. So on the banking side of it, we're seeing a lot of banks deregulating. So we had Trump was in office in 2018 or whatever, 4 year stint. They deregulated. The banks spent millions and millions of dollars lobbying to get some sort of deregulation. So a lot of these smaller banks or mid-sized banks got it, but then they don't need quants because they're not really. So model validation, risk management used to be this very rigorous field, and the biggest banks tend to keep doing it, and then they've deregulated. So a lot of those jobs have turned into like paper pushers, or they've exported them to other countries trying to get rid of the work itself. And then the buy side itself seems to be it's a more of a booming space. Tends to be more jobs in that space because the economy is doing better and there's less regulations. So there's more in that space on it. But a lot of the H-1B rules that have been adjusted and talked about currently in the U.S., we're seeing companies really hesitant to hire. And so it's kind of this dicey area where no one knows where it's going to go. Because I can tell you, like, the supply of quants in the U.S. now is like 10 times what it was 5 years ago. And it's not that there's 10 times better people. It's that there's the same amount of quality candidates. And now there's a bunch of just like finance degrees that have relabeled as quantitative finance. And so when you're interviewing, going through that process, you're trying to figure out who really understands the math and the stats of the programming. It's becoming harder to hire. So I'm not sure where the industry is going to head, but it's a little bit of a tough time, at least in U.S. markets. I think Europe's feeling kind of similar pains as well, where it's hard to hire due to regulations and rules. The economy seems a little shaky as well. So there's this questioning of if the economy tanks, the buy side will stop hiring. But also without new regulations, the sell side's not hiring. And so we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen between that.
Okay, since a lot of deregulation is happening, so do you think this deregulation anytime soon, maybe in next 1 decade, can again give us a day or a year like 2008? Like, do you see this thing happening?
Yeah, it's the same pattern. We go through it. It's a cyclical pattern. It happens all the time. So we'll see another financial crisis occur. I worked in credit for the last, I don't know, 12 years. I feel like it's going to be a credit crisis. We're stretched really, really thin. Terms on loans have gotten ridiculously long. So we're seeing like 7 to 10 years to pay an auto loan.
Oh,
Which like back in the day was like 5 years. You got 5 years or less. And now we're out to 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 years in some crazy cases. So that's stretched. And then with that, we'll see a financial crisis and it will occur. And then all of a sudden everybody will go, oh, we need more regulation. We should have been doing things better, but we weren't. And so then all of a sudden we'll have more regulation in place. And of course, everyone will complain. I'm not typically a big fan of regulations in themselves. I think they're usually overreaching. They often aren't very prescriptive to like the actual issues themselves. But that being said, when government steps in and bails out firms and banks every time they occur, then there's kind of an incentive to not perform, like to not look at long term, right? So like if I could gamble with your money as the government and all the people's money, and my bonus could go from 10,000 to 100,000, I'm going to take the gamble because historically, right? You look at the window, you go, well, there's been like a handful of crises in 100 years. My curve's only 30 years long. If I see one crisis or two crises, I might get an awful bonus for a couple years. But if I keep gambling every year, essentially it incentivizes you to take more and more risk. Now, I don't think this is a good behavior. I think it should be discouraged in general, that people should not be trying to maximize their bonuses. But also, I think the way that banks are operated and structured, and even investment companies, especially on top of this, the structure should be structured differently so we don't incentivize that. But I think we'll see the same cycle. We'll see we're in a big rise. Everything's running. AI is booming. AI popping might trigger it. People realizing it doesn't generate profit. Or it might be the credit crisis, and then we'll see a crash. And then as firms start to shake out, and the banks have been consolidating, like Truist Bank, for example, in the U.S., and there's a few other ones currently going on, like Comerica, Fifth Third, and all them. As we're seeing the like more and more, key big players, and it does crash, they're going to have to bail them out again, and we're going to have that same kind of cycle, I think, for another infinite time of these processes kind of going on.
yes. Okay, interesting. Like, you said there are so many programs now available. They brand themselves as a quant finance program. Like, as an outsider, how do I figure out, like, it's not a fancy program with maybe quant sprinkled on it, but a hardcore quant program? I'm seeing brochure of couple of institutes. How do I figure out that this program is actually the one who is going to deep dive into quants? And maybe this won't give me a lot of placements from the campus, but it will give me a lot of skills, and I can figure out placements at my end only. So how do I understand it's a good quant program?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two things. One is looking at the rigor, like who's teaching the class. If you're taking stochastic calculus and it's taught by the finance department at the business school, it's not going to be very rigorous because the individual teaching that's not going to be an expert in math and statistical modeling. It's just not what it is. So try to look for programs that have a lot of courses taught in the math, stats, and computer science departments, because those professors, like, that's what they do every single day. Like, that's like their living is, researching and teaching in those sorts of realms with that.
Mm.
The other part of that is going to be looking at the industry application. And there are very, very, very few programs that have this. But you'll have a lot of people that are textbook. Like, they can teach you textbook from Stephen Shreve's calculus book, or they can teach you time series models from Box Jenkins. But can they apply that to an actual industry problem? Because it's very, very different.
Yeah.
And so I think looking at the mathematical, statistical, like the actual rigor of the program and making sure it's very deep on the skills and the fundamentals, but then also trying to find a program that has good application. Like, do the professors have experience, or are they practitioners teaching? That will often give you a little bit more of an edge. Because now, like, when you go to find a job, like, you understand what you're going to be doing and how you do that. Where there are a lot of programs that are just either pure academics teaching for the sake of teaching. So they'll, like, grab a textbook, like, off my bookshelf and be like, oh, quantitative risk management. Like, let me teach this. But they don't really understand it because they've never done it. And then also I'd avoid a lot of the business schools that, again, where they're predominantly taught in business schools. Nothing against business people, but even finance PhDs aren't the same mathematical rigor as like an applied math PhD or master's student who's teaching it. So those are kind of things I would look at when you're looking for quant programs.
Okay. And if I can't afford to be in best of the best colleges or go for that program, what can I do so that I can still break into this industry maybe 2 years down the line?
Okay, so the US itself, in almost every financial hub, I believe Hong Kong, London, Munich, these big financial hubs, all require a graduate degree of some sort. So that's really the route to do it. I would tell students, if you're really excited, you think it's a shortcut like a certification, or you're going to do it because you're really smart and you're a math and engineering student, or you have some publication, it's not going to work. We stick to the credentials. If you find jobs that are hiring and don't require that, you're probably not doing real quant work. You're doing business analytics or high-end finance and other things like that. But there's also another path, which I think a lot of students ignore, is not getting a master's in financial engineering or computational finance, but getting a master's in something like applied math statistics. So some schools will have a financial engineering degree, and it will be $100,000 tuition. And then they will have like a statistics degree or applied math degree, and it's $50,000. Same school, you have some crossover in classes, but the tuition will be vastly different just because one is viewed as a professional degree being in financial engineering, and one is viewed as an academic degree. If you focus on the skills themselves, you can often get a very similar structured degree with rigor. It won't probably have the application, but you can at least get the solid foundational skills you need in applied math, statistics, or even computer science, depending on the area of quant you want to end up in. But then focusing on the networking part is what you're going to have to really do. But it's another path into this, because if you do your research, you'll find people like myself who have an applied economics master's or an applied math or statistics or something else. And often it just comes down to making sure you learn the skills. But that can be kind of a budget route as well, is trying to find a not as popular degree and perhaps maybe it not as big of a name as school.
Okay. So I have one controversial question for you. Let's say one popular course or certification that you feel is overrated, and what should replace it? Maybe what is overrated first, then we discuss the replacement. One popular.
All certificates, CQF, FRM, CFA, any sort of certificate, I think in itself is overrated. The reason for it, I think, is because, let's start with CQF. CQF, I'm not a fan that they have different rates for different people. So if you come to India, I think it's like 7,000. If you come from US, it's like 20,000. It doesn't make sense why you're charging people different rates. Also, I think it historically had a really good intention, which was Wall Street was shifting from traditional Wall Street to quantitative Wall Street. And so they needed to train practitioners who had 10, 15 years experience into quantitative finance. The goal of that was to not teach all the traditional finance stuff because they already had that background in the markets, and then just to teach the math and stats to try to get them up to par. But now when you say, like, I'm going to compare that with a master's degree, it's like it is a whole experience of being in a brick and mortar school. There's a piece of the networking part as well with their students. There's also a realization, I think, of skills and testing that can only occur in a brick and mortar. So I work with some of the top universities that probably anyone can list off the top of their head in the US. And their professors complain to me that they struggle a lot with people cheating. During COVID was horrible. The program struggled a lot. So I don't think necessarily like an online certificate like a CQF could compete with it. Also for like FRM and CFA, I think they're two very different things. CFA is more traditional finance and analysis and accounting and corporate valuations and all that. FRM, I think, it's good in the sense it's risk management, but it's very high level, what a chief risk officer would view risk as. But it's not going to get into like, why is my data heteroscedastic and how do I fix it? It's just going to throw a hand wavy like, oh, there's a Garch model and it fixes magical things and it just goes out there. But there's no like deep understanding of that. And so I think as much as the certifications have a good intention and they can add value, so I think like FRM is good in the risk management space because it adds value to those looking for risk at a higher level because you're typically going to specialize, but it's good for a broad level. CFA is great for understanding businesses, finance, accounting, valuations from a traditional standpoint as well. And even CQF is good in a sense if you have some sort of businessy background already baked in. Perhaps you're not wanting to work in the US or a prime market and you're working in a different country, you work at a bank in some other country. I think it's a great opportunity to learn the skills and try to apply them as best as you can without professional training, I would say. And so it does lend some value to that. But in general, I feel like the certificates themselves are just they're too fast. They're too high level. And I don't know, maybe they should replace it with something really deep and rigorous. But I feel like if they did that, I don't think many people would enjoyably like take them. Like not many people want to get really into the weeds on things.
I think it's more about the commercial aspect because if you make it really focused, the audience for it is very limited. So maybe it's a really good certificate, but the institute running that certificate will not be commercially successful. So they have to make their choices, I think.
That makes sense. I mean, even as a YouTube channel, people always ask me like, "Oh, Dimitri, how wildly successful is YouTube?" I'm like, it makes me a couple $100 a month. Like I make more like an hour or two of work at my day job than I spend like an entire month working on YouTube. And to your point, right, the audience is so narrow. The funds themselves are very limited. So you think about like students, right? If I could bill someone that has 10 years of experience, I could charge $20,000. If I can bill a student, I might get like $100 or $200 out of them. So it's like I need a lot less professionals versus a students where I need a lot more students. And to your point, there's a commercial feasibility aspect as well that makes a challenge.
Yes. So let's say if you have to start today and from scratch, and you have just got your laptop and you have given yourself 12 months, I have to break into the field. What steps would you take?
That's a good question. There are a few different books I would buy. So I'll pull one off. I always have books lying around. I hate recommending this book too because my name's on the back of it. I'm one of the reviewers that tells you about it. It's a good book. But there's a book called Hands-On AI Trading. And there's a bunch of authors on it, but a shout out to Jared Broad. Jared Broad's the CEO of a company called Quant Connect. This book I like because it's not as academically as some of these other books I have sitting around. But the beginning chapters are like, how do you use Quant Connect, which is like the quant dev work? How do you connect a model to like data on the exchange to make some sort of decision to buy or sell something or make some decision, and then get that back, and then you have the data like what the results are. So Quant Connect does that, and Jared Broad has done a good job in the beginning of the book. And then I tell students, then the second half of the book is nothing but like small, short problems and really simple machine learning and statistical tools to help solve them.
Okay.
But the reason I like it is it provides code, it provides data. The breakout, which I won't pull the book out, I normally do when I'm doing consultation sessions, but it has like a summary of like, this is the problem. And then it has like a motivation of like, this is why you would need to solve this in the industry. And then it would go into like, okay, this is what we're going to try and use theoretically to solve this. And then it shows like a bunch of charts even in the book. And so I think it's a great way to get like hands-on practical training and practice in programming. You understand the industry a little bit, and then also you understand how to apply some machine learning tools in itself. I think that's a good start to get going. The other book I like, which I learned at in grad school, but I have an older version in S+, is Statistical Analysis of Financial Data in R by Renee Carmona. It's gotten much thicker, and I think the book's improved quite a bit.
Yes, I also have the same book.
Okay. And so I love the book because, again, it talks about like small industry problems. Like, you don't really get the depth, and you have to realize like you're not going to understand the industry at a great depth, but you'll understand like this is a problem. Like, how do we model a yield curve? And then it teaches actual statistics in the book, not hand-wavy machine learning of like, I fit curve to this and it fits great. It talks a little bit more about like the statistical tests, like stationarity testing within time series and why it's a requirement, not an optional condition. And it goes into it more like a math or statistician, or more specifically like a scientist. And I think with those two books, that would give you a good foundation. Also, like, just reading the books isn't good enough. So you would need like the full 12 months to really go through the books, get on a computer, do some programming in R and Python, and really kind of get involved in the problems. But I think that's the path I would take just to get going and to kind of understand the industry, the problems, and also do some learning along the way.
Okay. Take us through your journey, because you started with manufacturing. I was not aware about that. Then you moved, and then you took some leadership role as well, right? So what kind of skills does industry right now need from a leader, or like what skills you think you learned when you took that leadership role?
Yeah, so I mean, I started in manufacturing, as I mentioned. I took on some leadership roles because the company had no money, so they didn't have the option to go out and hire like a real professional manager and get someone with a lot of experience in the industry. So I learned a lot from that instance of being just kind of in over my head to start with, and I think that was beneficial. And then going through education, academia, I worked and went to school at the same time. So I was a student that didn't get to, put my textbooks down and sit and study and work. I was like driving in a car to another state to fix a project that was close to me, and then yelling on the phone for hours trying to fix some sort of corporate issue or some franchisee that screwed us or something that happened that was just not pleasant. And then I went through that process of learning and developing. And I think banks do things very uniquely in the sense of that there's a hierarchy of how you operate. So at least in the quant space to some specific point where it's like you have to be an individual contributor and you have to work X amount of years doing that job. And then if you're really good, you get promoted. If not, you have to work a few extra years and like it slows you down. But as you work through this, you need to understand not just the quantitative nature of your business, or like what you're doing as the quant building the model, but you start to interact with the other businesses, the use cases, understanding the business. Like, how do we make money? I think to most people, like, it shocks them. Like, how we make money is like servicing customers and loans. Even in the investing side, like you have a 401k or a pension or a wealthy client who's investing money in you to make a profit. Like, there's some sort of process they're going through with this. So there's this customer facing piece, this thing that you learn and you need to spend a lot of time getting used to. And then you slowly become management. So you become like a team lead. So you always worked on projects. You already know how to do these things in your sleep. But now they're like, you can lead the project and we'll give you one or two junior hires to help you do some of the analysis. We can get it done on time. And so you start to learn like how to assign work, how to deal with difficult people, right? I've had employees that are like, oh, I don't want to do this. This is like beneath me. And you're like, fine. As a manager, I'll do the work for you to show you that like, it's not even beneath me and I will do it better than you. So kind of like rub it in a little bit, make them realize like everybody's doing the work. It's not like there's tiers of work in itself. And then there becomes a point, I think, where you switch into more or less like senior management, directors, managing directors, heads of departments. And it shifts a lot. It's a really hard transition because a lot of us feel split. you either keep your quantitative skills and do the daily job and you stay like a line manager, or you go into senior management, which is like you have to let go of doing the math, the modeling and stuff as much. And now there's a new kind of burden, which is you need to figure out like a vision. So when I was the head of quantitative risk and research, my vision had to be, how do we implement a risk framework? How do I get all the other departments to understand how to use models? How do I get all the other departments to understand risk management in themselves? And then also, like, how am I going to build my teams out? So everything from compensation, I determined, decided, set structures and frameworks together, to promotions, to self-learning. So a lot of my day wasn't like the fun, exciting, like modeling anymore. It was more or less like, how do I structure a team so my team can be successful? So you're kind of looking up and down, realizing like, I want the people under me to be really happy. Like I want them to come to work every day and be like, we love being here. I'm learning. I'm understanding the business. I'm adding value. But then you also have to look up at the senior management to realize like, I can't give everybody also really fun, exciting projects that are good self-learning and growth projects that don't benefit the company. And so you're kind of split in this two-part portion, trying to understand how to appease senior management, and then also how to appease your lower self, and then complete like the big corporate goals, and then have a vision and convince everybody to go along with you. So there's a lot of, I think, just practice and training. I'll tell you, one of the best tools is watching your managers. So I've watched my managers over the years. We had an employee once that blew up and stormed out, and they were going to quit. And I was like, everyone's on the edge of their seat. Like, I can't believe this employee's yelling at our manager right now. And they're just like, just fire me, fire me. And so like all of us were like, they're going to fire him. They're going to fire him. Like, this is crazy. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And then my boss comes back in and she's like, everybody leave. And then like, we'll handle this. So we're like, okay. So everyone like quietly moves out. And in my eyes, I would have been like, fine, if you don't want to be here, like we'll fire you. Here's your severance package. Get out the door. We don't want to deal with this. But she made a really smart decision on this, where she was like, she sat them down and, talked them through like, I get you're frustrated. I get that you feel like you have the junior lackey work and you're more of a senior employee. I understand you don't think there's a lot of value added. So trying to sympathize with him to understand, like, I understand your pains, because we've all been in those junior roles and we've had crazy management decisions and things don't make sense. And then at the same time, she like convinced him, like, look at the bigger picture. Like, where are you really going to go? And so for me, like, as a management perspective, I've learned a lot from all the different managers I've had in all kinds of different stories and positions. Of realizing as a manager, you have to sit like very high above, high level view. So you can realize, like, one, I can sympathize with you on the daily grind, but also I can see the bigger picture. Like, in a week from now, you're going to wish you were back in this job, getting your comfortable paycheck and making things happen. So I think along that journey, there's just a lot that you learn from watching. And there's a benefit to kind of being at a few different companies and firms, so you can kind of see different personality types, because everybody tends to manage a little bit differently. And learning your style can be a little bit of a challenge to figure out.
Yes. And I think as you move up the hierarchy, initially I used to believe if I move up the hierarchy, I'll be at ease. I'll be doing less work and life will be more enjoyable. Life is enjoyable, but as you move up the hierarchy, I think the work that you do on the desk decreases, but the work that you're doing in your head, that's going 24/7, you can't stop that, because maybe after a couple of years, work becomes you and you become work. Like, it's going 24/7. You actually have to keep a pause. After 8 p.m., I'm not going to think about work, and sometimes something comes up and you have to go back. So I can relate with it, like why someone at junior level might feel frustrated initially, but someone at the senior level would have taken that call because that's the only option to do.
Yeah. I mean, there's another part of it too, I don't think a lot of junior employees see, which is there's a lot of mental pain and struggle that goes into it. So for example, like when you have to fire someone, it's not like some big companies will go, oh, HR will take care of that. But like, you're real people. Like, I've worked with you for how long? So they know like the reasons coming from me. And so having to like sit them down and do it personally and being like, we really appreciate your work. However, your work has been substandard. You're not following, corporate direction. You're not on the same page as us. And like being honest and open with them on why they're getting let go and then firing them, I think is a harder process. The other part too is trying to represent your team and then trying to keep a straight face and not share that with the employees. So like employees don't know, like when bonus season comes up or promotions come up, and employees will say like, Dimitri, I got this other great offer. I've got, a bunch of money. I could leave, but I decided to stay. They don't see behind the scenes of me having to go and fight with the CEO or COO or head of model risk or, a managing director, someone, and saying like, I know this employee, like the cap for this year, for example, like the maximum we can increase pay is 10%. But I'm telling you right now, as senior manager, we're going to lose this employee and I need 20% raise for them. And then having to be like, this is a really, like, has to happen. And then you're stuck in this weird paradigm of what do you do? Because I don't want to let them go, but I also don't have the money to do it. And so then you're trying to like figure out negotiations, and you deal with a lot of people you don't think you would deal with. Like you deal with HR. Like HR is complaining your employees make too much money. Or they're complaining that somebody got a promotion. And so I think there's a lot of these things a lot of junior employees don't see. Like they think like, I worked hard. My manager really approves of me. They got me this really big raise. My manager's great. But they don't realize like for me to do that, I'm having to argue and fight and manipulate like around the back with other management teams trying to make those things happen. It's always in poor taste if you like tell your team like, oh yeah, like that department's not great, because then you kind of undermine the corporate culture as well. So you have to play this weird balancing act of keeping the peace between everybody, but then having to have separate fights and arguments internally to get things kind of done and make sure everyone's happy and productive.
Yes. So being a small business owner, I can relate with it. And I'll give you one more level of stress that we face. Is like setting up, because like my organization right now, it's growing. Maybe we were 5 people 3 years back. Now we are a team of 40 people.
Okay.
So setting up those management level, like now you are responsible for this. And like I won't be looking after this problem, and that person is not able to cope. Like firstly need to prepare that level of employees that you have to take up the management roles, you have to let go of operations, and there will be problems. I cannot give you a handbook that this is going to be problem and this is going to be solution, and then you can't come to me for every small thing. So that's another challenge that we are facing right now. But yes, I can relate with it. And have you been through that, like where you have to like actually go and tell someone that you're not supposed to come from tomorrow because like the company have to let you go off? Have you done that?
Oh yeah, I have fired people in the past. I have had people get up and scream and throw stuff across the room, become quite violent in the process. So it's not a fun process. Usually in the quant space, it's pretty calm. It's like I'm disgruntled, I'm not happy about it, but I'll leave. But yeah, I've been through a few of these firings and letting goes.
Okay. Like as of today, what drives you? Maybe it's curiosity, or maybe fear of, like I have this fear of being average, or maybe your love for mastery, or maybe something else. What's driving you right now?
That's a good question. I think part of this has been actually part of my exploration over the last like probably 6-7 months of I've been trying to pivot and transition and think about what is the actual reason of why I'm doing things. I think it's more of an academic interest and just like a curiosity of understanding how the world works. As a consequence of that, quantitative finance just happens to be part of that process. So like I get really excited when I can sit with the textbook and like spend the time to study and work and figure out like how the components work and operate, and then like pulling in data and being like, oh, this math really makes sense, or this statistical model makes a lot of sense. It's the piece that I keep coming back to. Like dealing with the corporate side of it, dealing with the business, understanding how they make money. Like I get it. Like it's there. It's a requirement. It has to be done. But I think that the piece that really is like a foundational principle that is like unwavering is like the intellectual curiosity of just how things work. Like I get really excited when I learn how things work. Like I had honeybees for like 7 years.
Yeah.
I'm not a big honey consumer, so like it seems like an odd thing. But I have books on the biology of honeys and the body parts and the pheromones and how the whole hive works and operates. I think it's just a curiosity piece of being excited on how things work and how science and how life kind of comes about. Quantitative financing just kind of falls into that naturally, where it's very academic-y. There's lots of study and research and texts. And so really I think the educational piece is like my driving factor for why I do what I do.
Okay. I'll come to the beekeeper stuff in some time. I have got few follow-up questions first. So, like You told, I think 2-3 days back, you uploaded a video, Quant Finance is dying, right? It was 1 hour
Yeah.
long video.
Yeah.
Uh, what roles maybe you'll see booming within quant finance in next 10 years?
So I think all of the roles themselves will continue to go. I think we're seeing less and less impact from the business though. So I think, so understand this from a bigger perspective of having some, like if I could magically pull someone out of thin air and say like, okay, this is a quant and they are really academic, they understand the business, they understand how to make money, they can tell a story, they can sell their ideas, everything. That person I think is going to be diluted across time. Like that person that existed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there aren't many of these people left. And I think part of this is the culture, which is part of the video. So I think part of the industry is kind of killing it. So I think, so kind of take a shot here at the buy side, the investing side. There's too much focus on making money and there's not enough focus on like intellectual rigor and doing things correct. And often I think the business half of a lot of these institutions, and this applies to banks as well though, everyone's chasing a buck. Like, I don't care how good your model is. I just want to make $1 and I want to make it today. And we're going to maximize that return. But there are very few firms that take a step back. And I think everyone idolizes, like, Jim Simmons at Renaissance. But nobody wants to do what Jim Simmons did. Like, nobody wants to be the academic who has research teams that's spending a lot of heavy time in like academic quality research. What they're focused on is like alpha research. So, like, A is correlated with B. Let's make a trade. And then they say, oh, we're going to put, like some metrics around it. Like they think this is like interesting. It's not. It's not that academically interesting. You could do alpha research and do it academically and make it far more interesting, which is what Jim Simmons did. D.E. Shaw, I think, is another perfect example of this. So I've never met D.E. Shaw or anyone, but their firm has the similar connotation of like, he built this wildly successful hedge fund. He has a biology background and he loves doing research. And he became the CEO of his own company and ran it. And then he decided, I don't want to deal with all these management headaches. Or I don't want to deal with the investors as much. I don't want to deal with all this, of the daily business. So he stepped down and became the chief research officer. And then he hired someone to be the CEO above him. And it's kind of that same process. And so I think the industry as a whole, a lot of these really rigorous, interesting, insightful jobs in a way are kind of dying out. And that we're just seeing like less and less and less skills being done. And the business side is perhaps overrunning the quant side with seeking profits and efficiencies. AI, I think, is a perfect example of this, and I kind of mentioned this in the video. I don't think AI is going to replace quants. I just think people are stupidly applying it. And so I think like the best example is like if I gave you a gun and said, here's a cool gun and it shoots a bullet and you're 5, you're going to run around just shooting at random things. And so you're going to be killing a bunch of people accidentally, not understanding the context of that. I think that's the takeaway from like the ML AI hype that we see is you can do it really rigorously. Like a gun can be used for hunting and generate food, or other purposes. There are lots of use cases for it, like protection and defense and all that. But on the flip side, I think it's like ML and AI is like there are very few people doing it very academically and wanting the explainability portion and explainability research to come out of it. It's more like, Dimitri, don't tell me about that. Don't tell me about the research. Don't tell me about the explainability. Don't tell me about risk management. I just want to know how to make $1 with it. And so I think we see this on a lot of pieces of the industry. And then also, I think I talked a lot about the education system is kind of disconnected as well. So you have like the business half maximizing dollars. You have some quants trying to be quants, but they're not able to communicate with the business half back and forth very well. And then you have academia trying to train people, but also being so disconnected from the industry on both halves of the business side and the quant side. It's like we're kind of all struggling as an industry, but nobody's really making things happen. So I think we will continue as an industry, but I think the quality of the research, I think the value the quantitative teams will add will decline. And who knows where that's going to go. I don't know if maybe machine learning will take off, but when that crashes with a crisis, I think they'll be a little bit more introspective on why we did that.
So I think because of AI, it's becoming more black box kind of thing. Like I just get the output, but I don't know how the intricacies of it, how internally it is operating. I don't understand it. And I see it in students as well. Maybe 10 years back, the kind of curiosity I had with the students that were having, like I really want to understand this. Today it is like I want this certification next 6 months. That's my goal. I don't want to actually imbibe what it is.
Yeah. And I think part of that is like we talked about, like my drive is like for me, it rubs me the wrong way and it makes me upset with people. Like, how do you not want to know what's in the box? Like, there's a box you could open, and like we just paint, to your point, like we're just painting everything as a black box now. Even if we understand a lot of it, we're not even like no one wants to know what's in the box anymore. Like they're so comfortable with like it's a box, it works, an answer comes out. And I think that just goes against a lot of the framework of like defining what is a quant, which is like engineering an actual model and understanding the strengths and the weaknesses and all those pieces of it. So I think that's, yeah, I agree. I think it's a little bit of a newer phenomenon, and I'm concerned on where it's going to head in the long run.
Yes. I generally say it in my classes, God is in details. So like you just can't read a sentence and say, I understand it. Maybe a paragraph and you can think about it for an hour. It's sometimes it could be that detailed.
Yeah. And even like perspectives. I think a lot of students don't understand this. I don't think you can until you worked for enough years. But often, like I learned like time series modeling. So I read through the book, I did the text, I did the modeling on the computer. I'm like, I get it. And then I worked at a company, Comerica Bank, when I was there doing CCAR DFAST time series modeling. And the question was like, but why? Like, why are the models not working for very long? There's no like answer. Like I'm going through textbooks and it's like, no one has this answer. Like, this is why your model doesn't work. And so then it's like, you look at the same information, but you look at it through a different perspective. And the more you struggle with different issues with that, to your point, like it's a sentence or a paragraph or something and you read it, but you don't really understand it until you really like, you have some sort of problem with it and you have to challenge it and kind of, wrestle with the idea within itself.
Yes. This once, like a few days back, I was teaching regression, and like I told them, it's the most basic form of model you are going to see. Someone asked me in the class, if you have to explain me good modeling, maybe in one sentence, how would you do it? So, because it was a class, we were going through something, so I gave him an example. How do you do it? Like, if you have to explain me what is good modeling in maybe one sentence, how would it be?
A good model is clearly defined mathematically, and the assumptions and weaknesses of the model are clearly known.
Interesting. Yes.
That's how I would define it. I think to that point, there's a book, I think it's called Models Behaving Badly by Emmanuel Derman. And of course, it was after 2007, 2008, and everyone's written it off and forgotten about it. But like, he has a statement there, like, you have to understand like the dirt you're sweeping under the rug, in the sense of like a model, like you build a model and it looks okay, but there's a lot of errors and issues. And then also there's a bunch of future potential problems the model could have, and understanding like where it could potentially fail and being able to like write those down on paper, I think defines like you really understand the model and you know that the model is going to work in a bunch of scenarios. First, I think poor modeling where it's like, it fits great, residuals look great. I did a validation or whatever, test cross validation with it, but like that doesn't answer the questions of like what are the features and how is it going to fail?
Nice. Now I just want to explore the personal side of it, like how beekeeping entered your life. Like, what do you love about it?
That's a good question. I have a lot of outdoorsy hobbies that are not necessarily athletics, like I think a lot of people think about. A friend of mine was a beekeeper. I found out like when I was older, he was doing beekeeping. He's old enough. He's my parents' age. And I've always just loved bees. I like to garden. I like nature. I like how things work and operate. Like it's that understanding of how things work. And my neighbor was beekeeping at my hometown. I happened to be back, and he's like, "Hey, if you want to do you want to look inside the hive with me? I'll let you come look." It's like, awesome, let's do it. So I went over to his house and I put on a beekeeping suit. And we looked in the hives and we're like, "Oh, this is really cool. I enjoy it." And so then I was living in New York at the time, so can't keep bees in an apartment in New York City. But in my mind, I'm like, as soon as I get a house, I want to get into beekeeping because I find it as like a fascinating process. And of course, then I'm on YouTube watching videos on beekeepers. And then eventually I got the hives, and I bought, of course, a bunch of textbooks on beekeeping and looking at the science behind it. So a lot of it, I think, is just the curiosity of just having like interesting hobbies. And I think a lot of people miss that. Like, interesting people have interesting hobbies. So my hobbies are like very wildly different from each other. So I'm doing math and stats, which is very like academic-y.
Yes.
Beekeeper for a long time. I have like 30 something fruit trees, and I have 24 citrus trees in pots. And I get down into, I run a whole other YouTube channel on my fruit trees, automotive repair and restoration. So I'm restoring a 1966 Ford Fairlane. I was a DJ in a past life. I used to do weddings and parties.
Oh, great.
So I have a lot of these really interesting and unique hobbies that I've slowly developed over time. And I think just part of it's just like having a zest for life, like finding things that interest you that aren't necessarily like commonplace. So I find not enough people these days like dig deep. Like if you love music, like, dig really deep and understand it and understand the industry and understand like the pieces of it versus like a lot of people nowadays are like, I like video games and they play like a couple video games. Or like, I like music and they listen to a couple songs, but they don't like really get into like the details of like, maybe I should learn to play an instrument, which I play the guitar and I played clarinet for a handful of years in school. And so, yeah.
Yes. And it keeps you mentally sane as well because you're working so hard that it helps you to reset your mind. Just helps you to cut off and just focus on something else other than work so that next day you are fresh and you can again go back to your work and focus on bigger problems. Coming back to the bees point, like I don't know anything about beekeeping, but because I was about to host you, I was searching about beekeeping and like I realized they are insanely structured. Like the system they follow, the queen bee, and like if the queen bee is not there, the entire hive will disappear. Like, does it help you to think about systems, risk, resilience? Because I was able to relate. There exists a great system that maybe as an outsider I don't understand, but each bee have a work to do, collecting nectar all the way to like building the hive. Anything that you can relate to your work and beekeeping? Anything that connects?
There's a few things. One of them is beekeeping is highly debated on actually how beekeeping should be done. I think it's much like the industry. So there's all kinds of debates on industry and people in itself. But I look at it from a similar perspective of like, so I did beekeeping. I did what's called natural beekeeping. So in beekeeping, one of the biggest problems a lot of beekeepers run into is varroa mites. Varroa mites carry a disease and it creates colony collapse. And it's been this big struggle and argument and fight. So, of course, I approach like a scientist, like a quant would. So I go out and I get some books, and I read some books, and I go, okay, I think I understand which part of this is there's things that contribute to it, and there's research that's been misdone, and, you're trying to weed through this, much like quantitative finance. And so I settled on what's more or less natural beekeeping. So there's no plastic frames. The bees create all their standardized cell sizes. I don't use any chemicals to treat the bees. So a lot of beekeepers spray for varroa mites, but it's trying to understand like these problem solving skills of like why the hives collapse and crash and how you go about solving them. So that part is very similar, like a scientific approach of like you're trying to discover how to do it best, whether it's building a model in quant finance or it's learning to keep bees based on a variety of different methods. That's part of that. The other process too is I think there's a lot of social skills that are kind of interesting within beekeeping, which we don't commonly see within humans. So it's kind of interesting to kind of understand and like, it seems odd. Like to your point, like there's a queen bee and the pheromones that the actual queen releases through her feet actually release into the hive. And every queen has a different scent somewhat, but it's the same chemical and same process. And so the bees stay, to your point, because the queen is there and they know the hive is steady and stable. And then bees actually all do the exact same job, but it's just depending on their age and kind of the balance of the hive. So bees are born, they get fed, they grow, and they go through this process and they are nurse bees. So the nurse bees take care of the other bees. And then you become an undertaker at some point. So any bee that dies in the hive, your job as a bee is to carry out the dead bees and dump them out the front or to remove them from the hive to prevent disease and other things. And then eventually you become a forager bee at the very end. And forager bees go out and get nectar and pollen and come back to the hive. But often it's kind of like looking at this as a job perspective as well. Like it might seem like in our eyes, like, oh, this job is like a fun and exciting job, and this job's a boring job. But realizing like it's a full lifetime. Like you're going to be an individual contributor, and you're going to complain about it. And you're going to be a manager, and you're going to complain about that. And you're going to be an executive and senior team, you're going to complain about that. You start to realize like it's kind of like beekeeping and like being a bee is like you always have a job. There's always something you have to do as you progress through life, whether that's being an individual, contributor, a manager, senior manager, whether that's being a child, a parent, and an adult, a parent, a grandparent. There's kind of like this life cycle with it. And I think with beekeeping, you start to kind of like you see it a little differently. It's kind of you're like the god almost of like over the bees because you can kind of control and change the environment. But a lot of the behaviors and kind of things are interesting to kind of like compare to humans because a lot of it's not comparable. But also there are some kind of analogies with like work and responsibilities and a successful hive is one that works together. If a queen dies, for example, and they can't replace her, the entire hive will die. So there's kind of some interesting parallels, I guess, in societal structures.
Yes. Okay. Great. Interesting. Coming back to your personal content creation journey, like why you started content creation? Like I think you started your YouTube channel back in 2015-16, right? So like
Yep.
what was the motivation?
I was mad and unhappy. That's probably the best way to describe it. I graduated from University of Michigan, which is it's called like public Ivy. It's like one of the best public schools in the United States. They had a quantitative finance program. I started in their financial engineering masters, and then they canceled it the first semester, which was fine. The career placement and job placement for the program was not great. There was not a dedicated person doing it. The business school didn't treat us very well. Like the whole thing was like it had a lot of the right academic pieces, but it didn't have the career resources to really place students, support us, train us, educate us, and get us to that like career portion. And so I transferred to applied economics. It was like the same thing. Like I interviewed like at Burger King to do like operations or analytics or something, which was boring. Like I don't want to do that. But there's no one else. Like there wasn't these big companies coming to do all this recruiting there. So when I graduated, I was like a little upset and frustrated. And I discovered through the process of failing hundreds of applications and failing interviews, like I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't do the mock interviews, so I was like very awkward and rigid on like, introduce yourself. I'm like, I'm Dimitri Bianco. I have a applied, economics master's from University of Michigan, and I want to be in model development. But like I didn't have like a story and a process. And so by the time I'd finished interviewing with everybody, I was really smooth because I'd failed so many interviews. I'd applied to so many jobs. I finally figured out how to write the resume, do the interviewing, and do that full process. And so I started the YouTube channel a few months into my first job of like, the system sucks and it's broken. And there are a lot of schools out there that are top-notch schools that don't have good career resources. So it started off with that process of like, how do I help students just understand like what's the actual process? Because like this big top secret. And a lot of companies don't even know. Because a lot of the hiring managers don't work with HR that closely, so they don't even know what's the HR process, what's the hiring process, and all that. So that's really why it started. And then as it got growing, I realized a lot of the programs weren't teaching the rigor, the insight, the information, the depth of like how things should be looked at differently. And so I kind of use my channel as kind of an outlet of how to do careers, quantitative finance, and anything kind of related in that space. I even have videos on like random life advice. Like somebody complained, like, Dimitri, you had a video on like why you should be married. I'm like, it impacts your job and your daily life. So it kind of grew out of, the frustration of the lack of resources, and hopefully it was kind of there to support other students, programs, and professionals.
Okay. I think I saw your last. I think the one video was on health and something. I think 3-4 days back I watched that video, and like I was like, this guy is talking about quants and health and marriage and everything. Like so it felt your channel feel really personal, like a bigger brother working in the industry, advising a younger brother, like get this fixed and you will be able to achieve this, or take care of your health, take care of your marriage, learn the skills, this industry is dying. So it really helps. Has it helped you personally, like being a content creator, like how you have seen personal side of growth because of content creation?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things with this. One, I'm not very extroverted, which kind of surprises people. So it's almost like a pseudo extroversion of like I can express my ideas in a video format. And so it's a good way to kind of go through that process of, like not complaining, but like almost being able to unload like the mental burden you carry of like the process with it. It's helped me a lot with jobs as well, because like imagine someone's going to hire you for like a either really quantitative job or really management focused job. It's like, prove to me you're a great quant. Like, I don't know how to do that. Like, let me write you a paper. Like, it's a really odd thing. But on YouTube, you can create like layers of videos. And so people start to understand like who you are as a person. So I felt a little more heard in the industry from that perspective of like, I've had people that have been following me for the full 10 years, and they're like, they understand everything about me. But when like companies go to do hiring often, they'll be like, I saw your YouTube channel. And part of me like dies. I'm like, I'm a little embarrassed. Like, you watched my channel. But then also part of it is like, they understand like my depth of understanding on statistics and math and risk, because you can go through the content and search through that portion of that as well. It's also, I think, to help with just relating with people as a whole as well. So I think a lot of people view quant as like very mathy. Like, do good math, make lots of money, that's life. But what a lot of people don't realize, I think, is when you get older as well, or you get partway through a career, like 4 years, 5 years into a career, you start to like run into problems. Like, I'm right, I make great decisions, and management has no idea what they're doing. Or, my work is going great, but, I have all these other social life problems that are now interfering with my daily work. And I don't think a lot of people like conceptualize that on a younger level. And I think as you become older, it's like embarrassing to state it. Like, I don't want to say like, oh, I'm having, like health issues. Like, I ended up in the ER. So like, I don't want to say, oh, I'm 30 something years old and I can't handle the stress, and now I'm in an ER with like symptoms of a heart attack. Which seems like people are like, oh, you're just weak. You're not going through this process. But when you actually step back and look at it, I think a lot of people realize like they're in that same boat, but there's no one to talk to about it. And so for me, it's benefited me because like when I posted that, a bunch of people reached out to me and are like, I've been in that situation 10 years ago. I'm 60 years old and I was in that situation 10 years ago. And so the channel has kind of benefited me in many ways on a personal level and as a professional level of relating to people and kind of learning through that process.
Okay. And like when you get online, there are a lot of positive comments, maybe 90% of them, but 10% is criticism, and maybe out of which some is genuine criticism and few people are just hating you. So how do you handle this criticism? And because like you are very raw with your opinions on the channel, so I'm pretty sure you would be getting some criticism. So how do you handle that?
So I actually buffer myself a lot on the channel. So people think I'm very straightforward. In real life, I'm probably 10 times more straightforward, but I filter myself a lot because I know there'll be a lot of criticism from it. So it does impact me in that sense. The other part is trying to take things into context, which I think is always challenging and hard to do as a content creator. Because as you get criticized, you're like, the first reaction is like you're like upset. Like, this person has no idea what they're talking about. Like, they don't know anything. And then trying to take a step back and realizing it doesn't even matter, which is hard to do. And so I know a lot of content creators just stop reading comments. And for me, I read most of them. There are times when I know like a video will be too controversial, and so I'll try not to read very many comments just because it's not beneficial to me. Like, I have an opinion, I have expertise, I have advice. This is my opinion on it, or this is how the industry works. So part of it's just trying to ignore it and cope with it. Other times it's researching too, which is like the annoying part of like, I don't want to know, but I'll research or look at criticism, and it's always someone who's very young, someone who doesn't even work in the same part of the industry, something like that. And if I know somebody and it's a valid complaint, then it does get to you. You think about like, maybe I should make a rebuttal video, or maybe I should think through how I think about this, or like, it does make you think like, why is the opinion different from that process? So I think the hardest part of content creation is coping with the criticism. A lot of it's not valid. When they are somewhat valid, it's more challenging. But it's definitely a hard part, I think, to kind of ignore. But I think that's really the only thing you can do.
Have you made any rebuttal video because like you got a comment, and to reply to that, instead of doing it in the text, I'll make a video and explain it to you? Have you done that?
I have made them, but I don't think I've ever published one. One of them was on, one recently was on understanding the U.S. education system. So I did it on H-1B. I explained like, the struggles with H-1B. And then one of the comments I always get is they always say like, obviously quantitative finance is not focused on finding the best talent because they do hire Americans too. And obviously the American education system is really poor and it sucks. And I was doing, these classes when I was an undergrad, but you guys are doing them at grad school. Or I did them in high school and you guys are doing them in grad school. And so I made a rebuttal video, and a lot of it's like, there's just so much disconnect of like how the world works. So one thing like in the US, for example, was the education system is very different. Like we want to be very good generalists. And this has made the US a powerhouse in business because we have quants, scientists, business, finance, accounting, tellers, customer service, accountants, janitors. Like we have this whole slew of people. But you spend 2 years like in college doing general studies. And then you spend 2 years doing specialist studies. And so then when I start to do these like rebuttal videos, I start to get into the facts of like, so, somebody commented from Italy. My family heritage is Italian. They're like, how many of these Nobel Prizes have you won? How many Fields medals have you won in Italy? And then it's like, you start to get on that like offensive, like that's what I thought. Like you don't have that many medals. Like it's China, Russia, India, and US. Like these are the dominant powerhouses in these sorts of fields. And so I luckily think about them and I watch the video later. Like I wait like a couple days and I watch it and I'm like, I am right. Like I don't disagree with it, but I also like realize like it's just going to anger more people. And often I think it turns off more positive viewers, like people that agree with you. But as soon as you become very argumentative or you become more like, I don't know, kind of combative, then it turns off a lot more people. So I've made videos, but I don't recall ever publishing one.
Okay. So do you immediately publish video after recording it, or like you wait for a day or two?
It depends. If I'm in a hurry, I'll record it on a Saturday night and publish it on Sunday morning. But most of them I record probably about a week in advance, and then it gets scheduled for that Sunday morning. Some videos I have published that are like months old. So it's like I have something, it was a great idea, I got busy, and then other videos got published, and sometimes they're a little bit older, but in general, they're usually like a week to 2 weeks old.
Okay. Let's say if your content disappeared tomorrow, some glitch on YouTube, something happened. What would you want your audience to still remember you for?
That's a good question. I would want my audience to remember me more for life lessons, I think, more than like any sort of like career or quant specific. So like part of these is trying to convey like the interest of learning. Like you're here to enjoy the process. I talk a lot about that with like developing careers as the interest. I would hope people would remember me as like somebody that was like, he worked in the industry, but a lot of his advice was like the reason we watched the channel. Like you didn't watch my channel to learn to program. You didn't watch the channel for a very specific skill set, but you kind of had the takeaway of like, it provided some sort of understanding of a broader context of the industry and how to like get the most out of life and work at the same time.
Okay, interesting. So what are you working, like what's next for you? Maybe professionally and personally, like what are you building towards right now?
So I'm working on my own company right now. I don't know how long I'll work on it, which kind of surprises some people, but I always have too many projects going and I have a hard time focusing on very specific ones. Right now, I am working on what's called Fancy Quant, which kind of brings in my YouTube channel, and then it adds a bunch of consulting arms to it. So it's really, I'm doing career consulting, which is fun. It gives back, provides a little bit of cash flow, but not a lot. And that's been fun. It's been nice. I talked to a lot of people from hedge funds, big banks, scientific labs, institutions, all about career problems, transitioning, senior management issues, student issues, all that. That's been a lot of fun. But there's also a piece of me that's like, I'm trying to get all this done and out of the way because I have like personal research ideas I want to work on. So I published a paper on the kurtosis conjecture on a while back. And I have all these like actual methodologically designed experiments of like how I need to go through and prove different parts of it, but I haven't had time. And so it's like, I need to write all these papers, but I don't have the time. So that's in the back of my mind. And then part of me is like, I'm itching to go back to the industry as well. So I'm not really making any money at this point. I'm just floating, exploring, doing a little bit of consulting on the sides. But part of me is like trying to figure out like, should I go back to, the big banks? I miss the banks in the sense of their structure, there's design, they're not moving too quick. I've played with the idea of going and working for fintech and the buy side, the investing side of it. Something new, a new challenge, something exciting to do. But I think deep down in the long run, I'll probably end up going back to banking. But I'm not sure if it'll be like, 2-3 months, or if it will be 12 to 16 months, or if it'll be a couple years. But in general, I'm trying to like still working on trying to get research done, doing some consulting, and then trying to figure out like where do I want to end up. And I think part of this problem is I have too many options. So it's not like a lack of options, it's too many. And I'm in this paralysis of like I've got friends doing startups I want to join and help, but I have research papers that I want to publish. And then I have like friends in the academic institutions that need help structuring programs. I'm like, I really want to help them too. And so I'm stuck kind of trying to figure out which direction I'm really heading. But I'm still kind of in that exploration phase right now.
What would you want to do long term? Maybe, let's say 20 years down the line. Like, would you want to retire and like just relax, or would you want to still contribute? Like, maybe it could be teaching or doing consultancy. In long term, what would you want?
I think in the long run, it will look like what I'm kind of doing now, where I will be doing consulting through a bunch of different kind of avenues. I really like having the freedom, which I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but I love having the freedom to like move my schedule around, make adjustments. I like being able to say like, somebody comes to me with this really interesting problem and I want to be able to solve their problem. And then I want to be able to go back to like a regular, like I have these regular clients and customers. Working in the corporate world is challenging because often there's conflict of interest. Like I can't, work at bank A and then help and consult bank B because now it's this conflict of interest. So I think when I retire or become older in that sense, I'll do a lot of kind of consulting as need be or as interesting.
Okay, and you want to continue content creation like over next say 20 years?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I enjoy it. Even if I leave quantitative finance, like content creation at some point, I'll still create. I have another channel called Bianca Land, and it's all about like personal hobbies and interests and how-to videos. And so I think I'll continue on that side as well.
Okay, okay, great. Um, Last few questions that I have for you. Let's say if you could give one message to your 21-year-old audience listening to it right now, what would it be?
That's a tough question. For the 21-year-old audience, my advice would be to find something that you really love to do and understand why you love to do it. So I feel like a lot of times when we're younger, you have very limited choices, right? You're a student, you're trying to find a job, you feel like you have all these choices, but realistically, like you're in college, you're starting to narrow down your options, and you're going to end up essentially chasing one thing. But I think a lot of people don't stop to ask themselves like the why. Like if I ask them like why quantitative finance, or like why are you studying biology? It's always like, oh, it's interesting. But like the question is like why? And I think a lot of people don't think about it enough. And so my advice to them is be to sit and really think about like what's the why? Like why are you so excited to go a specific direction in life? And spend at least like a month or 2 months thinking about it, because I think it'll take a lot longer than people expect. There's always like the common answers. Like why quantitative finance? Like, oh, there's problems that can never be solved and I like the challenge. But it's about why. Like you could work on cancer research, or you could work on quantum computing, or you could work on charity work that never has a solution, right? And so I think I would challenge them to really think those whys. I think it will help kind of set a better foundation for life moving forward. And then when you do hit rough patches, like you get laid off, you leave a job, you get divorced, a kid dies, something like that happens, it's kind of like earth shaking. You start to realize like what is my why? Like why am I doing this? And often it gives you something to kind of like fall back to so that you can keep building back off of that moving forward.
Interesting. And like last question from my side, like what's the personal rule that you live by that you wish more people would adopt?
Be honest. I find too many people are not very genuine and very honest with people. Uh, as an example, kind of on the last advice piece as well, it drives me nuts when people say like, "Oh, like how are you doing?" Because like I already know the answer. The answer is supposed to be, "I am doing well," or like things are going good. But 90% of people, like that's not really your mental state or like how you're doing. I wish people are just more honest with that. I find that it falls into business as well. Often people do deals, but they don't have like an honorable reason to complete it. So, for example, like if you, give me an example of this. In business, we'll make an agreement with a corporation and we'll say we're going to buy X, Y, and Z, and this is what we're going to do. And then there'll become some loophole and we can get out of it, and we don't technically have to pay what we paid. The other half of the party didn't technically deliver everything. And so then a company will be like, awesome, we're going to save some money, we're going to get out of this deal. In my eyes, it bugs me because I wish people were just like more like honest and committed. I'm like, I agreed to do this and we're going to do this. I also don't like legal contracts, which is kind of surprising for being in the US. But like I also like when I tell someone like I'm gonna fly out to do like a presentation for your school, and if they agree to pay me to come, if they end up not paying me, I'm gonna be upset. But I feel like I already agreed to it. Like even though you broke your end of the deal, like you still need to complete that honorary contract or that obligation. And so I wish people are honest in the sense of like when you say something, like your word means something, instead of it just being kind of like a loose like this is just how things are. That's how kind of the business world operates. So that's kind of my advice on. I wish how things were a little different.
Okay, okay. Great. So I think these were a few questions from my side to help you understand, not as one professional who is working in the industry, but actually try to understand, like it's like maybe 8 hours, 9 hours of your day would be your profession, but remaining time is like actually what you do. So this was my sincere attempt to get to know you better, and I hope I have like helped you to also like reflect what is currently going in your life, and maybe some suggestion to me. Let's see, I'm a bit younger than you. I'm also not as seasoned as you are in the industry. So maybe some suggestion for me on the closing note. What I can do so that I can maybe deliver better to my students.
The advice I'd give to you is focus on the industry, don't focus on the students. So I think this is one thing that actually sets my channel apart. I find there's a lot of content creators, schools, even educators. Like you can think about name finance people. I think often everybody thinks like I'm an educator, like even myself with content creation, I'm an educator of some sorts. So often we focus on the student. I think it's often very hard perspective to take of like step back and think about it from like being like a manager or like a corporation, which seems very odd and weird. But think about it from like, how do I help the students to fit into the proper industry? And I think often we make mistakes on like, how do we get students to look the right way? Or how do we get even professionals? I work with professionals. I'm assuming you work with professionals as well. How do you get a professional from like level A to level B? But I think one of the advices or kind of tips I would challenge you on is like, think about it from a different perspective of like, if I was the corporation, a hiring manager, would I want person A to go from a level A to a level B? A lot of times you'll find out right when you give advice, it's like people just don't know the skills to get there, but they're a great person. They're well prepared. They just need a little bit of help. I think that's a lot of where the training is. But also I think some of the hardest advice to give in training and education is like when somebody's missing a really critical gap to get there and trying to be honest on that. So that'd be my advice to you. It's something I've struggled with a little bit over the years as well, as like, how do you look at that from a different perspective?
Right, right, right. So like I have a gazillion more questions to ask, but maybe some other day. It's like for me, it is very therapeutic because like I'm able to. It's like 2% talking who are into relatively adjacent industry. I'm not fortunate enough to be in industry right now, but you are involved academically, who have same interest in quants and books. They also want to explore other things other than what is happening inside these books. So it's always good to connect. So anything, and maybe in case you have visited India or planning to visit India, feel free to like ping me. I'm always available, and we can always catch up physically in the office or somewhere else. And that's it from my side. It was really good connecting you.